morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. This is Dan, and this is the Napkin Academy. And today I am super excited to join with Alexander Osterwalder, who will be joining us in our Draw Together session today. I want to do a quick introduction of Alexander. I think that many of you might be aware of Alexander, in particular because of his globally best-selling, international bestseller, paradigm-shifting book, Business Model Generation. Alex, can you hear me okay, and can you say hello?
Hello, I can hear you perfectly fine. Can you hear me?
Good. I can indeed, Alex. Well, welcome. So I'm going to just draw here for a moment. Alex, I've got control of the pen just for the next couple of seconds. So I would like to say that I think Alexander Osterwalder is truly remarkable. And I think the reason that I could say that is so amazing, Alex, about your contribution is the creation of this thing that you call the business model canvas. Would you mind just at a high level, 30 seconds. What's the business model canvas all about, and why has it had an impact on business around the world?
So it's a very simple, practical, visual business tool that allows you to visualize or make explicit how you create, deliver, and capture value. So it really shows how you create value for your organization, for your business. And the reason I think it really took off is because it's very simple, because it's very intuitive, and in particular because it's very visual, so it really creates a shared language. Today I was just talking to a CEO of a multinational company, and he really wants to roll this out as a language across his marketing team. So it just makes conversations a lot easier with these kinds of visual tools, even in business, or say in particular in business.
In particular,
because we don't use enough visual tools. Yeah.
Well, and in fact, Alex, that's how you and I originally met. Is I knew that you had been aware of the back of the napkin, and I think perhaps you wrote me a note or I wrote you a note saying, I love your map, and you said, I love what, some of the tools you have. And what I find really interesting about the business model canvas is that although this is what the canvas actually looks like, in reality, this is what the business model canvas actually looks like. It is a tool for people to use. And if you just do a search on Google Images for the business model canvas, you come up with dozens of these images of people engaging with all of their multicolored Post-it notes. And Alex, I saw a quote on your site indicating that at this point, something like 5 million business people around the world or more are using the business model canvas. Is that true?
So that was from actually a couple of years back, how many
my.
people downloaded the canvas from our website. It's hard to know how many people exactly use it, but today I do think we can say it's become a standard from startups to large organizations to map out their business model. And by the way, you mentioned that back of the napkin, that was a big inspiration for business model generation, right? Because we were looking at all the visual books, of course, that were out there. So it was a great inspiration to get us to actually make a visual book. So thanks again for that.
Well, I'm glad I was able to contribute something to it, because I think that, obviously, Alex, the impact that you've had on business, I would say, is without a doubt greater than just about anybody else who's in this idea of using images to try to communicate ideas. Seriously. And so I know you've got a number of things out there, but from a book perspective, you really have the two main books. Would you mind just telling us quickly, what is kind of the difference or the defining characteristic of business model generation versus value proposition design, which is your newer book?
So business model generation was really about mapping out business models, right? How do you create, deliver, and capture value for your organization? What we've seen is that when people use the business model canvas, they would really get stuck with the value proposition, right? Because people come from a product-based world. So we created another tool called the value proposition canvas. And then we 2 years later, we wrote the book or created the book around it. So the value proposition canvas and value proposition design is really about making explicit how you create value for customers. So value proposition design, explicit. You make explicit how you create value for customers. Business model generation is how do you make it, how do you make it explicit how you're creating value for businesses. So you need both to succeed, right? So it's two different jobs to be done, and you need both to build a successful business, right?
Business side and customer side. I hadn't thought about like that.
Exactly.
Interesting model.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we're going to draw a little bit more of these kinds of pictures because, Alex, the real reason that I've got you on the line here, one quick question before we go into Draw Together is just real quickly, Alex, what are you working on next? What would you like people in the Napkin Academy to know that Alexander Osterwalder is up to next? What's big out there in your world?
So we're trying to do two things, which are probably bigger than ourselves. But I've been in Silicon Valley a lot, so you need to think big. So we're trying to create these standards for innovation metrics. So just like we tried to create a standard for how you map out business models, we're now trying to create the standard for innovation metrics. That has two aspects. One is how do you measuring from idea to business, right? Pre-revenue. And the second one is how do you measure your business model portfolio? So if you're Nestle or GE or a MasterCard, you have a whole portfolio of existing businesses, but also of new ideas. So it's all about visual again. How do we make the strategic portfolio of existing businesses and new projects, new growth engines, how do we make that visible? So we created this language at the operational level. Now we're working at the language on the strategic level.
That's fantastic. And is there something coming out of this that at some point we would be able to see that you'll be able to share with? Is there a new book coming, perhaps, or something like that?
Well, we
Maybe?
already have the portfolio. We already have the portfolio map out there. So there's a tool, a prototype tool. We blogged about it. So on the blog, you can find that. Book, I don't know. We'll see. There are other ways of diffusing ideas, but
and thank goodness there are, because those books, they will kill you writing those books. All right, Alex. So this is fabulous. But the real reason we're here is not so much to talk about business model generation in the abstract, but to draw pictures in the concrete. So Alex, the real reason we're here is to do some draw together. Alexander Osterwalder, are you ready to draw together? There we go. Okay, so we're going to select a topic. I've already chosen them. They come directly out of your book, Business Model Generation. We will draw it together. You as the guest get to start. We will have our blank Zeitboard here in a moment. You get to draw 5 lines trying to visualize and explain the quote that we're going to have. So, Alex, here we have them. Behind one of these 5 doors, well, behind all 5 of these doors, I have a quote from Business Model Generation. It's up to you. Alex, which door would you like to choose?
Door number 1.
Door number 1. All right, door number 1 says, well, Alex, this is your quote, so why don't you go ahead and read it? These are your words.
Some value propositions may be innovative and represent a new or disruptive offer. Others may be similar to existing market offers, but with added features and attributes.
Okay, so it sounds to me like we've got 2 different kinds of value propositions here, those that are innovative and disruptive and those that may be just a change from the status quo. So let's jump over to our Zeitboard, and here we go. Alex, you get to begin. We're going to draw a picture of what that just said. All right, you get to start.
Okay, so I like to draw innovation in companies as a continuum from improve to invent.
Okay.
And you have value propositions over here that you already have in your company and you can improve them. And you have value propositions over here, which are really just new ideas. And you actually have to search, kind of iteratively to figure out what the right value proposition is that the market wants.
Okay, so let me come in here.
Here.
Okay, so now I'm going to draw something too. So I'm going to say that I have this group of people out here. I'm just going to draw 3 of them that I'm going to call the market. And I'm going to say that those market people, I'm going to draw my 2 lines. Some of them are looking over here and some of them are looking over here. So I've added something else now. I would call that the market. Now, as we start to think about these value propositions, some disruptive, some that are not, let's continue to try to map this out. How do these impact the market?
First, I would focus on how it actually impacts the company. So because before we can even understand how it impacts the market, because here, like this is in the market. This here is a linear process of improving it. So for the market, there's not that much change, right? Maybe, you update your iPhone software or whatever, iOS 128. So here, the market really doesn't know yet what you're trying to offer, and you don't know yet if it's going to work. So basically, the way I like to draw this is if we take the market here on the right-hand side, so here we have our customers, here we have our little company. Usually, you think you know what your customer wants. That's what you put here. But the customer knows what he or she wants. And the overlap is usually very small between what you want to offer and what they actually want. So you have to go out and test that so you can gradually increase your understanding of the market so you can create something that they want.
So I'm going to say here, I'm going to draw now for a moment, that I'm going to say this little overlap here is the area that gives your customer the maximum happiness or maximum value, and it also gives your business maximum happiness or, bottom line, I guess you could say maximum value. So I guess that what we're saying is it's only that tiny little overlap that is giving the maximum value to both sides. Is that a reasonable representation of what you were digging into here?
No, actually, this is what you
Oh,
might start out with. So this thing here is way too small, right? And it's
right.
usually because you think you're right. And actually, there's a number like Simon Kucher did a research, and they showed that 72% of all new products fail. That means
Wow.
that this overlap is not big enough, right? It's only 28%. So the goal
Mm-hmm.
is that you as a company, you talk to customers as early as you can. You want to increase that overlap that you just drew and said is very small. So the
Right.
point is, as a company, you need to try to make that bigger. It's too
And
small at the beginning.
let's draw out how might we do that. And I guess part of it is back to this idea that some business model innovations are disruptive and some are incremental changes. Are we saying that over here, these are the business models that are truly kind of disruptive? Is that what we're talking
Yeah.
about? And over here, they're just more kind of marginally changing things as we go. Is that really what we're looking at?
Yeah, so that's why over here, if you draw the same circles, the overlap is a lot bigger because you know your
Oh,
customer, you know what they want, you understand the market. So there's a lot less risk in on the improved space. And that's exactly why companies don't like doing the right-hand side because there's so much unknown that they think, oh, the risk is too big. But basically, it's because the process to invent on the right-hand side is very different from the left-hand side. So here you have like a wall.
mm-hmm.
Companies know how to do this, and only companies like Amazon, they know how to do this because that's a very, very, experimental, iterative process where you need to fail and learn and improve and iterate. On the left-hand side, it's execution. Companies are comfortable with that. They're a lot more comfortable with the left-hand side because that
Sure.
overlap is big, because their knowledge is big.
So I'm going to draw a typical business person here. So that's someone wearing a hat. But because this is an atypical world, this is a woman business owner wearing a hat. And she's actually quite happy because everything's comfortable over here and she knows how it works. But over on this side, this is another business person. This is one with a propeller on his head. And she's saying she's very happy over there. This is like our Amazon type person because she's inventing new things. When you said, Alex, that then one of the next things you're working on is a model for a business model portfolio, is that what you're talking about here for a business to be able to say, I don't want to be only on the left hand side, I also want to be over on the right hand side?
Yeah, so we kind of ran out of space, I think, but basically you map out all of your businesses here, like the existing businesses that I have. This is usually business units, right? If you take Nestle, there's water here, there is coffee here, there is, health products here, and so on. And then they have new ideas. So this is the other side of the portfolio. So the
Mm-hmm.
best companies have portfolios that span, the existing businesses of which some might be disrupted and die, which is normal, right? But they have a pipeline on the right-hand side that fills it up. And if you
That's
can't
beautiful.
visualize that, as a management team, it's kind of hard to see, well, is my pipeline full enough and filling up everything on the left that maybe disappear. And we have a tool like the Canvas to visualize that.
That's fantastic. This was really great. Alex, would you be willing to do one more? One more quote?
Absolutely,
I
yeah,
love doing this.
absolutely.
Okay, let's do one more. So I'm going to get you over here back to our doors again. And back to the same drill. We've got our 5 doors. Don't pick number 1 again because it's going to be the same quote. But of the other 4 doors, which one would you like to take a look at?
I'll pick door number 2.
Door number 2. Door number 2. Okay. Oh, this one directly segues out of what we were just talking about. So, Alex, what does this quote say to us?
Tailoring products and services to the specific needs of individual customers or customer segments creates value.
Hold on. Let me get back
Yeah, you
to,
bet.
let me get over to the Zeitboard and I'm going to move it. I'm going to shift it up so we can be starting with another blank Zeitboard. Do you see the new blank Zeitboard there?
Yep.
Okay, so what I thought was interesting, I just want to I'm going to jump back to the quote one more time. tailoring products and services to the specific needs of the individual customer or segments creates value. So tailoring it creates value. What is this all about? What is this telling us?
So this is actually pretty interesting because it's kind of the jump we made from the business model canvas to the value proposition canvas. And
Okay.
one of the big things we've seen is that people don't understand customers. So we came up with the customer profile that looks like this, right? And basically we map out three things to understand our customers. It's the jobs they're trying to get done, the tasks. So what are they trying to achieve? We're trying to look at what's holding them back. So the pains that prevent them from doing those jobs well, and the gains, their objectives that they're trying to achieve. This is a customer profile, right? So this allows us to understand the customer. Okay, now, if we look at the other side of the quote, the product side, well, as a company, you have specific, products and services. So we might draw this as a product here. But the product on its own doesn't create value. You have to connect it back here to the pains and the gains. So basically, we came up with something that we call the value map. And here you have the pain relievers. So this is like a headache pill, okay? And this allows you, your products and services, you make explicit how they relieve pains. How does my product and service act as a headache pill, right? To alleviate pains. And here on this side, we have the gain creator. So you describe how are your products and services helping your customers achieve their objectives. So basically, what we do here is we look at both sides. We try to understand our customers. We sketch them out. And then we connect how our products and services actually matter to customers by addressing the jobs, pains, and gains. So this is the second tool. I mean, I explained it now in 20 seconds or so. Basically, this allows you to make explicit how your products and services create value for your customers. If we go back to the quote, that's that connection between the left-hand side and right-hand side.
So Alex, I'm going to draw a little bit on top of this, and I'm going to go in a slightly different direction, but it's going to tie back in. The fact is you're sitting there in Switzerland, and me here in the United States, when I think about Switzerland, I tend to think in sort of stereotypical fashion about two things. The first one is I tend to think about a chocolate bar. So here's my little chocolate bar. And the second thing I think of course, is Swiss timing. So I think of a very beautiful, intricate watch that's just miraculous on the inside. And so when I'm seeing you work and as I'm seeing you think and draw for us, two things are coming to mind. Number one, what I love more than anything in the visual world is people who create models of systems. And it seems to me that the models you're creating are really as beautifully wrought and thought out as a perfect Swiss timepiece. It's not a surprise to me that your work is coming out of Switzerland, just from sort of stereotypical ideas. And the second thing about the chocolate, and this is going to be a little bit of a metaphorical stretch, but bear with me for a moment. When I look at this beautiful map that you've drawn, the immediate thought I have is, you're a genius. It's so clear because it is so obvious. It is as obvious as a bar of chocolate. But isn't it interesting that in the obviousness of it, that's what actually makes it so very, very good, because we tend not to see the things that are so very obvious. Let me ask you this. How many customers do you go to? How many clients, when you show them something like this very simple and elegant map that you've drawn for us, are just blown away by the clarity and the simplicity of it and saying, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I was looking for? How many of them, is that a high percent?
It's a very high percentage, and probably sometimes say, yeah, but this is obvious, until they start using it. And what they immediately see is that it's a shared language, right? So the point is, because it's simple, people can adopt it. Because it's simple, they can make things explicit. So they can make them clear. And the whole goal of these visual languages that we create is to have better conversations. That's why I like quoting your blah, blah, blah book. So beyond the words, we need the visual language. So the best, value propositions and business models come out of conversations that are not just happening verbally, but they're also happening right there on paper. So these are all tools that allow you to kind of make your business models and value propositions and portfolios more tangible. Those are abstract things. and nobody kind of defined them, and nobody created a visual language for them. So we're trying to make the abstract more concrete by making it tangible and visible.
Every word you just said, every concept you just said, it rings bells in my mind. This idea of tangibility, of clarity, of simplicity. I mean, and again, to beat the drum, let's draw the little drum one more time, because I think, all of us are beating on this drum a lot, saying, if you can make something visual, Alex, as you've just done right here, it does make it tangible in the mind in a way that the words flying past each other simply do not. It's really incredible. So this picture right here, this is the basis of is this the value proposition canvas? Is that what we're kind of looking at right here?
Yeah, this is the value proposition canvas. And what's interesting, we don't have space here, but if I just
Well, we
draw it
can
on
make
the
a new one.
side here,
Let's here. Yeah, let me make a new one. What the heck? We've got some time. This is really good. So
let's
let
do
me
that.
make a new frame. Let me just bracket this so we know where our live area is. Okay. So go ahead
Yeah.
and take us wherever you want it to go.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is important to understand, so we started out with like the business model canvas, right? This is allows you to make visible how you're creating value for your business. You can zoom in, like you go in more granularity. Now we're talking about how we're creating value for the customer. But it's like a zoom in,
Mm-hmm.
okay? But you can also zoom out. You can say, okay, well, I don't design a business model in a vacuum. So if you think of your business model as a house, you design it in an environment and you have things around it. So we like to say, okay, here you have the market forces, here you have the tech and regulatory trends, here you have competitive forces, here you have the macroeconomic trends. But the point is that we can zoom in and zoom out of these concepts and understand in more or less granularity. And if you'd go really deeper here, you could get all the way to the processes, right, that you have in a company. So this is kind of the granularity in terms of detail. And if we now look at the timeline, right, so we might start with an idea, but ultimately we might shape this in a workshop or, in our heads if we're an entrepreneur. But what we need to know is that this is probably going to be wrong. So you have to kind of iterate yourself over time towards the value proposition and business model that works until you kind of can build a real company. So you're never going to get it right at the beginning. You kind of make these business model canvases and value proposition canvases until you get it right. So
Mm-hmm.
by having this visual language and knowing the trajectory, you can have a lot better and clearer conversation. And you can bring order into this messiness of the innovative process. So people like to say innovation is risky and expensive. That's not true if you do it right. You basically reduce the risk by testing and iterating, right? So you put order into this chaos. It's different from execution, which is linear. Here it's an iterative process, right?
Let me just maybe do exactly the same thing you've done. I often represented something similar to that. And I so admire the level of thought that you've put into doing exactly this, taking order into this chaos. I'm going to have to go back and reread value proposition design. I'm working on some projects right now that are explicitly, I love your word, about defining what it is that is interesting in this product to the customer. Alex, we've done 3 drawings, and I'd like you to do one more if you don't mind. Now we've got a number of questions, but in particular we've got Maria. Here's the question. So let me zoom in a little bit on this, Alex, so you can see it okay. So a lot of words here, but this is just, I think the idea is pretty clear. So this is Maria saying, hey, Alex, you do an exceptional job of creating an overarching structure and business model generation. I'm interested in hearing how you use drawing and visual thinking to capture a large concept. The work looks like concepts are simplified, but I think distilled is a better term. What is that process like? To the extent that you mind sharing, how did you go about generating the business model canvas? All right, so I'm going to give you one more blank page. And Alex, if you don't mind, uh, tell us a little bit about the
Okay, so
genesis of the business model canvas, how you distilled that chaos into simplicity.
so I can maybe talk about the process of how we create any kind of tool, like just like the portfolio map that we just did or the metrics stuff we're working on. So basically, we kind of come up with some, let's see if this works. some idea of a job to be done in business. So
Hmm.
when we started out with the business model canvas, the job to be done was, how can I make my business model tangible? Not the business plan, but just the business model. Same thing for value proposition. Then what we actually do is, well, first we read quite a bit. So we do a lot of reading, a lot of web surfing, seeing what's out there on the web. And then the third step is, okay, we take all of these concepts and we put them, when I say we, it's often with my longtime thinking partner and former PhD supervisor, Yves Pigneur. We put this on sticky notes on a wall. Just every concept, everything we read, everything we learned, everything that might be of importance, we put it on a wall. So this is a chaos, right? It's like this, just this, it's a diarrhea of stuff on your wall.
Yeah.
I like, Dave Gray says the wall is the new desk. But then the next step is we do this kind of affinity mapping. So we start grouping these things. Okay, so we start seeing groups. Okay, so these might be the concepts that are starting to emerge. We start giving this a name, a label, and then we start putting the links between the concepts, whatever that is. And then ultimately, we kind of have something, and we start turning this into, whatever shape it is. So in case of the value proposition canvas, let me take this away. The first thing that we drew looked more like this, like a football field or something like this. And then we prototyped visual aspects until we had kind of the visual aspect nailed as well. So it starts out with an idea of a job to be done that's important for business people. Then we look at everything that exists. We always build on other people's work. Then we brainstorm all of the concepts. We try to put some order into it with affinity mapping. Then we prototype a concept. We test it usually in workshops, like with a lot of people here. And then ultimately we come up with some tool that we also test, but then we put in the market when we think it's right. That's how we do one concept. And the other thing that I just drew on top is every concept should be integrated with the other concept. So our worldview is getting larger with the tools we create. None of the tools is disconnected from the others. And I like to say, sometimes business people or thinkers like to make one tool that should solve every business problem. You don't ask your heart surgeon to operate on you with a Swiss Army knife, right? So you basically, hope your heart surgeon is trained in using a lot of different tools and does that really well and is, specialized tools for different parts of the procedure. So, the Swiss Army knife of business is the SWAT, for example, or sometimes even worse. I think in business, we use more like a plastic knife to perform heart surgery. What we really want is, a sophisticated tool set like the surgeon. And actually, we want people to be trained in these tools. The surgeon is trained for 13 years. So
Yeah.
in these business tools, I think we're acquiring knowledge as well. So that's kind of how we build up our world view and how we work on different tools.
Well, I'm going to make a few comments now because this was beautiful. Um, Comment number one is how closely your process with Eve maps to the pattern recognition system of the human visual engine, in the sense that there's an idea, there's something that needs to be solved. And in the case of our brain, it's I need to move through this next space. I need to navigate my way from this room to that room. And then what I do is I collect all of the visual information. This is just this kind of looking and seeing very rapid fire scanning of the environment around me to try to detect every piece of information that might be important to me. And it turns out that if my idea is to navigate from one room into the other, vast amount of the information that is available is not relevant to me to needing to do that. So what I do is I do a kind of a very quick visual triage and I get rid of all those things that are not relevant to what I need to do right now. And if there's some that are questionable, well, I maybe just put them on the back burner, but I don't throw them away yet. And then what I do is I clump those pieces of visual information into a set of patterns, and then I look for the connections, and that's exactly the way I navigate my way through. And what I find lovely about this is that entire process that we're talking about there, in the case of the visual engine, takes about 1/10 of a second to go from I need to do something to now I have the image in mind, the meaning, the cognition in mind that I can actually do it. It takes 1/10 of a second, which sounds like a long time, but you got to keep in mind that we're also doing this thousands and thousands of times a second. So Alex, the reason I'm excited about this is because what you've just unpacked for us is a model. I would call it a Swiss Army model. It's a one-size-fits-all model of how do you go about problem solving. There is a way to do it all of the time. There are multiple ways, but this is a way that you can almost always guarantee is going to work. Start broad, do triage, collect, look for the patterns, link them together, see what comes out the other side. Does that sound fair to you?
Yeah, and I like this, and I'm going to test something with you. So one of the things we try to do when we provide these visual tools is decrease the cognitive load. And when people face a problem, by giving them a simple and practical tool, they don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? So we kind of make that process almost, it sounds like, okay, from problem to how can I solve it? We decrease that time to a certain extent, right? So by making simple tools, you can increase adoption. And I think many of the business tools out there or business concepts are way too complex. So the ideas are good, the problem they're solving is the right one, but they don't maybe focus on the UX, the user experience, and the user interface of the tool. So I think this visual work is important. So it sounds to me like what we try to do is in line with that cognitive process, which is pretty interesting because we're trying to speed that up so we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Are you familiar with a book by a gentleman named Steve Krug who it's called Don't Make Me Think? I'm going to have to get Steve Krug on one of these draw togethers. So Steve Krug wrote his book about 12 years ago. It's called Don't Make Me Think, and it is the best book that I've ever read about user experience design, because what he's saying, and with an incredible amount of scientific rigor, examples, just countless number of examples. So the name is Steve Krug, K-R-U-G.
I remember it.
And the inspiration for me was exactly, Alex, what you're describing. Don't make me think. Because the moment you make me have to think about your process, now I'm spending all of my cycles on the process and I'm not getting to the end point, which was the goal. So this isn't to say we want people to be stupid. This isn't to say we want our tools to be so dumb that they trick people into false security or understanding. On the contrary, my take on it, and please let me know, and then we'll have to wrap it up. I would love to talk for another hour, is the idea of minimizing cognitive load. Don't make people think about your tool. Make your tool so obvious and clear that the moment someone sees it, they know exactly how to use it. And then they can spend their cycles on the use of it rather than the tool. Does that sound like what you're thinking?
Just to add to that, I mean, what we help with, all the business problems we help with, they're not new. So sometimes people say, yeah, but you're not inventing anything new. Well, it turns out 5 million people are using it. So basically, what I think we're making better is the process of so if you discuss a business model, you don't have to focus on what is a business model. You don't have to focus on getting aligned anymore. So you take a lot of the junk away, which is just a waste of time, right? So these visual tools make everything a lot more efficient and effective. So that's the point of using these visual tools, right? So if they're simple, you can get right to it. You don't have to learn a lot. You don't have to think a lot. And it's a repetitive process, right? So that the whole goal of making these visual tools is to do better what we're already doing and what we're often not doing very well. Typically strategy development, new business models, new value propositions, portfolios. It's all being done, but it's not being done very well because nobody ever really came up with simple and practical tools. I think there's now a whole group of people who's working on this, and that's pretty exciting. Dave Gray being among them with the culture map, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Dave Gray is working on his, who we just talked to a couple of weeks ago. Alex, we're going to have to wrap this up, but I started out this draw together by saying you're remarkable, and I'm going to conclude it by you're even more remarkable than I thought. I knew you were very smart and very clear, and with the things that you've shared with us, you're even smarter and clearer. I hope we have a chance to do this again. Alex, again, I want to thank you so much for your time. Alex, any final thought to leave us with?
This is awesome. I think it's awesome what you're doing. So thank you for your inspiration that you provided and helped my thinking.
Well, likewise, sir. Likewise. Thank you. All right, everyone. This is Dan signing off from the Napkin Academy. Look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks, and have a great time drawing. Bye-bye.